Emma sat in her small London flat, staring at the overdue bills scattered across her kitchen table. The electricity bill was bright red with final notice stamped across it. The rent notice had been slipped under her door that morning, at 28. She worked 2 jobs just to survive, cleaning offices when the sun came up and serving tables when it went down. Her hands were rough from scrubbing floors, and her feet ached from standing for 12 hours every day. She counted the coins in her purse for the 3rd time that evening, £43.60. That was all she had left until Friday's paycheck. Emma rubbed her tired eyes and wondered how her life had become so hard. Other people her age were buying houses, getting married, having children. She was just trying to keep the lights on. Her phone buzzed on the table, making her jump. The screen showed an unknown number from Manchester. Emma almost didn't answer. Unknown numbers usually meant debt collectors or scam calls, but something made her pick up. "Emma, love, it's your Aunt Margaret." The voice on the other end was shaking. Emma's heart began to race. Aunt Margaret never called unless something was very wrong. "What's happened?" Emma asked, already knowing she didn't want to hear the answer. "Your dad. He's had a heart attack. A bad one. The doctors say you need to come quickly. They don't know if—" Margaret's voice broke. "They don't know if he'll make it through the night." Emma's world stopped spinning. The bills on the table, the empty purse, the aching feet. None of it mattered anymore. Her father, Robert, was dying. The man who had raised her alone after her mother passed when she was 12. The man who worked extra shifts to buy her school uniforms. The man who taught her to ride a bike in the small park near their old house. The man who held her when she cried after her first heartbreak. "I'm coming," Emma whispered into the phone. "I'm coming right now." She hung up and ran to her laptop. Manchester was 300 miles away. The train would take over for hours. And she didn't have 4 hours. Her father might not have 4 hours. She needed to fly. Emma's fingers shook as she searched for flights. Every website showed the same terrible truth. The cheapest last-minute flight cost £400. £400 was more than her rent. £400 was more than she had ever seen in her bank account at one time. £400 might as well have been for $1 million. She called the airline directly, hoping somehow the human voice on the other end would have mercy. The phone rang 6 times before a bored voice answered. Double quotes, "Hello. This is British Airways. How can I help you? I need to get to Manchester tonight." Emma said quickly, "My father is dying. I need the cheapest seat you have." "Let me check for you," the agent said in a cold, professional voice. Emma could hear typing on the other end. "I'm sorry, miss, but our cheapest available seat is £400. That's final." "Please," Emma begged. "Isn't there anything else? Any standby seats? Any cancelled flights? He's dying. I'm sorry, miss. £400 is the best I can do. Would you like to book it?" Emma hung up without answering. She couldn't speak. The tears came fast and hard, falling onto the bills scattered across her table. How could money stand between her and her dying father? How could a number on a screen be more important than love? How could the world be so cruel? She looked at her bank account on her phone. £47.12. That was everything she had. It wasn't even enough for a tank of gas to drive to Manchester, let alone a plane ticket. Emma put her head in her hands and cried harder than she had since her mother's funeral. She felt trapped, helpless, and utterly alone. The walls of her tiny flat seemed to close in round her. The silence was broken only by the sound of her own sobbing. But then, through her tears, she heard her father's voice, not on the phone, but in her memory. It was something he had said to her many times when she was growing up and facing problems that seemed impossible. "Emma, there's always a way. You just have to be clever enough to find it." She wiped her eyes and looked round. Her flat, at the laptop still open on the table, at the phone that had brought her the worst news of her life, at her own reflection in the dark window. She was her father's daughter. He had taught her to be strong, to fight, to never give up. That night, Emma made a promise to herself. She would find a way home, no matter what it took. She would be clever. She would fight the system. She would find the cracks and slip through them. Her father needed her. And she would not let money be the thing that kept them apart. The search would begin at dawn. Emma barely slept that night. She sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, searching for answers. The screen glowed bright in the dark room as she typed cheap flights Manchester over and over again. Every search showed the same crushing numbers: for £100, £350, sometimes even more. But Emma refused to give up. She clicked on link after link, reading travel blogs and forum posts from other people who had faced the same problem. Slowly, she began to learn things the airline websites never told her. She discovered that Tuesday flights were often cheaper than Monday ones. She learned about something called hidden city ticketing, booking a flight that connected through Manchester instead of flying there directly. The idea seemed crazy, but the prices were sometimes half as much. Emma read about people who booked flights to cities past Manchester, then simply got off the plane during the connection. It felt like cheating, but she was desperate. Her father was lying in a hospital bed 300 miles away, and she was learning that sometimes you had to break the rules to get to the people you loved. At 7 in the morning, there was a soft knock at her door. Emma looked through the peephole and saw Mrs. Davies, her elderly neighbor from across the hall. Mrs. Davies was 72 years old and lived alone with her cat, Whiskers. She always wore a flowered dress and carried a small handbag, even when she was just going to check her mail. "Emma, dear," Mrs. Davies said when Emma opened the door, "I heard about your father from Mrs. Peterson downstairs. I'm so sorry. Love." Emma's eyes filled with tears again. She had been trying so hard to be strong, but kindness from strangers made her feel weak. "I used to work for an airline years ago," Mrs. Davies continued, stepping into Emma's flat. 23 years with British Airways. "Let me share a secret or two." Emma led her to the kitchen table, where the laptop was still open and showing flight prices. Mrs. Davies adjusted her glasses and looked at the screen. "Oh, dear, you're doing this all wrong," she said gently. "The airlines don't want you to know their tricks. But I know them all." Mrs. Davies explained how calling airlines at different times could give completely different prices. Try calling at 6 in the morning when they release new inventory. She whispered like she was sharing state secrets, and always asked to speak to a supervisor if they say no. Sometimes they have bereavement fares they don't advertise. They keep them hidden for people who really need them. Emma wrote down everything Mrs. Davies told her. She learned that airline workers had more power than they let on. They could sometimes override the computer prices if they wanted to help someone. And another thing, Mrs. Davies added, never search for the same flight too many times. The computers track you and raise the prices. Clear your browser cookies before each search. Sometimes use your phone instead of your computer. The airlines show different prices on different devices. After Mrs. Davies left, Emma spent the rest of the day learning more tricks. She discovered that airline apps often had different prices than their websites. She learned about something called incognito mode that would hide her searches from the airline computers. She read about people who found cheap flights by searching for one-way tickets instead of round-try. P1's daughter Emma felt like she was studying. For the most important test of her life, every piece of information might be the key to getting home to her father. She made lists of phone numbers, wrote down the best times to call, and practiced what she would say to the airline agents. The next morning, Emma set her alarm for 5:30. She wanted to be ready when 6 o'clock came. She made herself a cup of tea and sat by the phone. Watching the clock, at exactly 6 in the morning, she dialed the airline number. The phone rang 3 times before a voice answered. "Good morning. This is British Airways. My name is James. How can I help you?" Today, James sounded different from the agent she had spoken to before. His voice was warm and friendly, not cold and rushed. "My father is in the hospital," Emma said, trying to keep her voice steady. "He had a heart attack. I need to get to Manchester, but I can't afford the regular ticket prices. Is there anything you can do to help me? I'm so sorry to hear about your father," James said softly. "Let me see what I can do for you." Emma heard typing on the other end of the line. She held her breath and waited. "We have a standby option for £200, James said finally. "It's not guaranteed. But if someone doesn't show up for their flight, the seat is yours. You would need to be at the airport and ready to go." Emma's heart raced. £200 was still more money than she had, but it was possible. She could borrow from her credit card. Maybe ask her boss for an advance on her paycheck. "I'll take it," she said quickly. As Emma hung up the phone, she realized something important. She was learning that the system had cracks, and desperate people could slip through them if they were clever enough to find the way. Emma arrived at the airport 4 hours early. The standby ticket meant she had to wait and hope someone wouldn't show up for their flight. She found a quiet corner in the departure lounge and sat down with her small backpack. The airport was busy with people rushing to catch flights, but Emma felt invisible among all the travelers who could afford their tickets without worry. She looked round and noticed she wasn't the only person sitting alone looking worried. Near the window, a young man in army clothes was staring at his phone with a sad expression. He looked about her age, maybe younger. His uniform was clean, outworn, and he kept checking his watch every few minutes. On the other side of the waiting area, a woman with tired eyes was trying to keep her two small children quiet. The little girl was about 5 years old, and the boy looked maybe 7. They were sharing a bag of crackers, and the woman kept counting money in her purse when she thought no one was looking. Emma felt a strange comfort knowing she wasn't the only one struggling. She had always thought she was alone in her money problems, but here in this airport, she could see other people fighting the same battles. After an hour of waiting, the young soldier got up and walked over to her. "Excuse me," he said politely. "Are you waiting for standby too?" Emma nodded. "Yes, trying to get to Manchester. My father is in the hospital." "I'm William," he said, sitting down next to her. "I'm trying to get home to Yorkshire for my grandmother's funeral. She raised me after my parents died. The army pays me, but not enough for last-minute flights." Emma felt her heart break a little. Here was someone else who couldn't afford to say goodbye to the person who mattered most to them. "I'm Emma," she said. "I've been learning some tricks about airline booking. Maybe they can help you too." William's face brightened. "Really? I've been trying everything I can think of." Emma pulled out her notebook where she had written down everything Mrs. Davies had taught her. If you book flights that connect through your actual destination, sometimes it's cheaper than flying direct. It sounds crazy, but it works. William leaned forward, interested. "I heard about something called skip lagging from another soldier. You book the connecting flight, but get off at the connection city instead of the final destination. That's exactly what I'm talking about, Emma said, excited to meet someone who understood. The woman with the children had been listening to their conversation. She walked over with her kids. Looking embarrassed but hopeful. "I'm sorry for listening," she said quietly. "I'm Grace. I'm trying to get to Scotland to see my daughter. She's in the hospital there. My ex-husband stopped paying child support 3 months ago, and I can barely afford rent, let alone plane tickets." Emma's heart went out to her. Grace looked exhausted, like she had been carrying the weight of the world on her shoulders. "Please, sit with us," Emma said, moving her backpack to make room. "We are all in the same situation." Grace's children sat down quietly. The little girl leaned against her mother, and the boy pulled out a coloring book with only a few crayons. "My sister told me about airline credit cards," Grace said. "If you sign up for them, you sometimes get enough miles for a free flight immediately. But I don't know if my credit is good enough." "That's brilliant," William said. "I never thought of that." Emma wrote it down in her notebook. "We should share everything we learn. Maybe together we can figure out how to beat this system." They spent the next 2 hours sharing stories and strategies. William told them about military discounts that some airlines offered but never advertised. Grace explained how single mothers could sometimes get emergency travel assistance from charities. Emma shared everything Mrs. Davies had taught her about calling airlines at different times and asking for supervisors. They formed an unlikely friendship in that waiting area, sharing phone chargers when batteries died, offering snacks when someone got hungry, and most importantly, sharing hope when despair tried to creep in. Emma realized she wasn't alone in this struggle. Across the country, ordinary people were fighting the same battles against an expensive system that seemed designed to keep families apart. But here in this airport, they were finding ways to fight back together. When the gate agent called Emma's name for the standby seat, she felt a mix of joy and sadness. She was going to see her father, but she was leaving behind these new friends who understood her struggles. She hugged William and Grace goodbye and knelt down to hug the children too. "I'll share everything I learn," she promised them. "We'll help each other. This doesn't end here." William gave her his email address, and Grace wrote down her phone number as Emma's plane lifted off the ground. She looked out the window at the lights of London getting smaller below. She felt something she hadn't experienced in years, the power of community and shared knowledge. She wasn't just going to see her father anymore. She was carrying the hopes and dreams of other people who were fighting the same fight further. First time in days. Emma smiled. She had found her tribe. Emma settled into her window seat on the plane, clutching her notebook full of travel tips. The flight to Manchester was only an hour long, but she was determined to learn everything she could. Her father was waiting for her. But she also knew that William and Grace were still back at the airport, hoping for their own miracles. The man sitting next to her was wearing an expensive suit and typing on a laptop. He had the confident look of someone who flew often and never worried about ticket prices. Emma noticed he had a special boarding pass with gold writing on it. "Excuse me," Emma said politely. "I'm new to all this airline stuff. What does that gold writing mean on your boarding pass?" The man looked up and smiled. "I'm David," he said. "This means I have elite status with the airline. I get free upgrades, priority boarding, and they treat me much better when things go wrong." Emma wrote this down in her notebook. "How do you get that status?" David explained how airline status could be earned quickly through strategic spending. Sometimes paying a little extra on one flight gets you free upgrades forever. He said, "I spent an extra £100 on my first flight with them last year." And now I save thousands in upgrades and better treatment. Emma found this fascinating. The airlines rewarded people who already had money to spend, making it easier for them to save money later. It seemed unfair, but it was another piece of the puzzle she was trying to solve. Across the aisle, a woman with silver hair was reading a travel magazine. She overheard their conversation and leaned over. "I'm Rebecca," she said. "I've been flying for 30 years, and I've learned every trick in the book." She told Emma about the 24-hour rule that most airlines had. "I book flights immediately, when I see a good price," she explained. "Then I have a full day to find something even better. If I find a cheaper flight, I cancel the first one for a full refund." Emma's pen moved quickly across her notebook. This was like getting a free day to shop round after you had already secured a seat. "But here's the real secret," Rebecca continued, lowering her voice. "Airlines have different phone numbers for different departments. The number for reservations might give you a different price than the number for customer service. And the number for complaints might have agents with more power to help you." Emma wrote down every word. She was beginning to understand that the airline system was like a maze with hidden passages. Most people only knew about the main parts, but there were secret routes everywhere. A flight attendant named Sarah came by to check on passengers. Emma decided to be brave and ask her some questions. "Sarah, what happens if flights get delayed or cancelled?" Emma asked. Sarah looked round to make sure her supervisor wasn't listening, then sat down for a moment. "This is important," she said quietly. "When flights are delayed or cancelled, airlines are required to provide meals, hotels, and alternative transportation, but they rarely offer these benefits unless passengers ask directly. Most people just accept being stuck in the airport, but they don't have to." Emma wrote this down carefully. She was learning that knowledge was power, and most people didn't know what they were entitled to. "Always be polite but persistent," Sarah added. "Being angry at us doesn't help anyone, but being kind while refusing to give up often gets you what you need." By the time the plane landed in Manchester, Emma had filled 3 pages of her notebook with new strategies. She had phone numbers for different airline departments, tips for earning status quickly, and a complete understanding of passenger rights. She had transformed from a helpless victim of airline pricing into someone who understood the game. But the real test came later that week. Emma created a group chat on her phone with William, Grace, and 12 other travelers she had met online through travel forums. She shared everything she had learned, and they began sharing their own discoveries. Within days, their little group was helping each other find deals in real time. William found a military discount website that Grace's sister could use because her ex-husband had been in the Navy. Grace discovered a charity that helped single parents with emergency travel, and she passed that information to 3 other mothers in their group. Emma posted a screenshot when she found a flight from London to Edinburgh for £50 instead of 300. 2 people in their group booked the same deal within minutes. The group chat became a place where people celebrated each other's victories. When William finally made it to his grandmother's funeral, everyone cheered. When Grace got to Scotland to see her daughter, the whole group sent heart emojis and messages of support. Emma realized that her knowledge had become a bridge connecting people who needed it most. She wasn't just helping herself anymore. She was part of a network of ordinary people who refused to let money keep them away from the people they loved. Every trick she learned, every deal she found, every phone number that worked became a tool that helped someone else. Her notebook had become a weapon against an unfair system, and she was sharing that weapon with anyone who needed it. Emma ran through the hospital corridors, her heart pounding with each step. She had never been so scared and so hopeful at the same time. The smell of disinfectant filled her nose, and the sound of her shoes echoed off the white walls. She found room 247 and pushed open the door. Her father, Robert, was lying in bed connected to machines that beeped softly. His face was pale, but his eyes were open. When he saw Emma, his whole face lit up with the biggest smile she had ever seen. "There's my clever girl," he whispered as she rushed to his side and hugged him as tight as she dared. "I knew you'd find a way." Emma cried into his shoulder, all the fear and stress of the past few days pouring out of her. "I thought I was going to lose you," she sobbed. "Not that easy to get rid of me," Robert said, stroking her hair the way he used to when she was little. "Tell me how you got here." "Margaret said you didn't have the money for a ticket," Emma told him everything. About learning the airline tricks, about meeting Mrs. Davies, about the standby ticket and the friends she had made at the airport. Robert listened to every word, his eyes growing prouder with each part of the story. "You did all that?" he asked when she finished. "My little Emma became a travel expert in 2 days." Emma laughed through her tears. "I had to. You needed me." During the 2 weeks she stayed by his side, Emma met other families facing the same problems she had faced. In the family waiting room, she met Jonah, whose son had been in a car accident. Jonah lived in Ireland and had spent her entire savings on a last-minute flight to London. "I don't know how I'm going to get home," Jonah said, tears in her eyes. "I used all my money to get here." Emma pulled out her notebook and showed Jonah everything she had learned. They found a flight that connected through Dublin instead of flying direct to Cork. It was half the price of the direct flight, and Jonah would be home by evening. She helped Tom, an elderly man whose wife was having surgery. Emma showed him how to use the airline app to find cheaper tickets than the website offered. She taught him about the 24-hour cancellation rule, so he could book a flight home without worrying about changing his plans if his wife needed him longer. Word spread through the hospital about the young woman who knew all the airline secrets. Soon, Emma was spending her afternoons in the family waiting room, helping people find ways to visit their loved ones without going broke. Her father watched all of this from his hospital bed when she brought him updates each evening. "You know what I'm proudest of?" he said one afternoon when Emma told him about helping a single mother get to her sick child in Wales. "Not just that you made it here, but that you're helping others do the same." Robert recovered slowly but steadily. The doctors said he would need to take better care of himself, but he would be fine. On the day he was discharged, Emma helped to more families find affordable flights before they left the hospital. When Emma returned to London, she couldn't stop thinking about all the people she had met. She kept getting text messages from the group chat with William and Grace, and emails from family she had helped at the hospital. Everyone was sharing new tips and helping each other find deals. Emma decided to start a simple blog called The People's Travel Guide. She wrote down every strategy she had learned, every trick that had worked, and every phone number that had helped her. She shared the stories of William, Grace, and all the other people she had met who were fighting to be with their families. Within a month, hundreds of people were reading her blog. Within 3 months, it was thousands. Her comment section became a community where strangers helped each other book cheaper flights, shared last-minute deals, and celebrated each other's successful reunions with loved ones. Emma still worked her 2 jobs cleaning offices and serving tables, but now she had a purpose that went beyond paying bills. Every evening, she would come home and answer emails from people who needed help. She would update her blog with new tips and share success stories from her readers. 6 months later, William got promoted in the army and could afford to visit his family regularly. Grace's ex-husband started paying child support after she took him to court, but she kept using Emma's tips to save money for our daughter's future. The blog had helped thousands of people attend weddings, funerals, graduations, and hospital visits they thought they couldn't afford. Emma's father framed her first blog post and hung it in his kitchen next to a photo of Emma's mother. "This is what love looks like," he would tell visitors, pointing to the framed post. "It finds a way." Emma had learned that sometimes the most valuable knowledge comes from our greatest struggles, and that sharing what we learn creates a network of hope that stretches far beyond what we can see. The end.